You got it.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the June 29th, 2024 Save the Frogs Africa Meetup. I am Save the Frogs founder, Dr. Carrie Krieger, and we have a special guest, Dr. Jeanne Tarrant from South Africa, who has been working with amphibians for a very long time, with a master's degree and a PhD, and has done work with the IUCN Amphibian Specialist Group and has founded a nonprofit organization, Anura Africa, which we're going to hear all about. Dr. Tarrant, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up in the world of amphibians? And then when you're ready, go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks, Kerry. Well, really nice to connect. It's been a long time, I think, since we've been trying to actually do that. So thanks very much for the invitation to present at your Africa Forum meetup. Yeah, so I am Jeanne Tarrant. I've been involved in amphibian research and conservation for almost 20 years now, which is a little bit scary sometimes to think about. And it's not a career that I thought I'd end up having, but it's been an incredible journey and one that I'm very grateful and passionate about. So I started with the Northwest University in Potchefstroom, and I see we have a couple of students from there online now, so great to see you guys. And honestly, I have not looked back since joining the African Amphibian Conservation Research Group within the university zoology department back in 2005. And the prof there, Prof. Louis Dupree, said to me, "Do you like frogs?" And I was like, don't really know, honestly. But I ended up doing an amazing project up in the Drakensberg and Lesotho Highlands. And I'd been living in London for a couple of years prior to that. And it was just amazing to be out and about in the fresh air and the mountains, and then learning about these incredible creatures, which I didn't really know much about. And really, 20 years on, I still learn something new every day about these fascinating creatures. And I think, part of my message is like, even if you don't become a frog biologist as your career, if we could just learn some appreciation about these incredible creatures and be cognizant of them in our lives, we're making progress. So yeah, I did a master's through that group, and then went on to a PhD, which is also something I never thought I'd do. And then founded the Threatened Amphibian Program within the Endangered Wildlife Trust, which is one of Southern Africa's largest conservation NGOs, operating across multiple areas and countries with different sort of programmatic focuses, everything from carnivores to cranes, all sorts. And so 12 years ago, or 13 years ago now, started the work on the amphibians there and ran a pretty successful program that grew year on year, looking at threatened species in South Africa, and overall employing a lot of people in the region, working on around 10 threatened focal species, and implementing direct conservation action for those species. And that ranged from creation of protected areas through to habitat management, and then a lot of awareness and citizen science sort of grounded work. So I always say my work runs the whole gauntlet from children's education. I've written a little children's book all the way through to legislation. So, you've got to wear, and I'm sure, Kerry, you know this, you have to wear many hats and have many feathers in your cap to try and do this job. But overall, it's interesting, and I think the people that work in frogs really are the best people, and that's also been a lot why I've stuck around, because everyone is really actually very nice and just working towards the same common goal of protecting these otherwise pretty underlooked and underfunded animals. So we need, as many of us as possible doing that.
All right, thank you for that. Why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'd worked for the Endangered Wildlife Trust. Can you all see that, by the way?
Yes.
for close on 12 years, and really learned a lot about what it means to work within the NGO space, being entirely reliant on donor funding, and so learned how to write funding proposals and manage budgets and manage teams and all of this kind of thing. And yeah, around about this time last year, made the decision to make the leap towards running my own completely amphibian focused, or as the name implies, frog focused NGO. And you're really taking some of the learnings from within my work at the EWT and starting to look beyond South Africa's borders to share those learnings and start to implement work elsewhere in Africa where it's needed. You know, one of our biggest gaps is capacity to implement this work. You know, there's very few. I think there's, aside from Anura Africa, there's Herb Ghana and Save the Frogs Ghana and Herb Cameroon. I mean, there's literally a handful of organizations that are dedicated to not even amphibian focused, but herb focused conservation on the entire continent. And you know, I think if we had to compare this to mammals, you know, even within a species of mammal, there'd be like hundreds of organizations working on lions or rhinos. So, you know, I think the time is right to start to expand that. And how do we get other African countries and in-country partners really starting to implement conservation and research for the region's frogs?
Jeanne, I recall being at the Wildlife Conservation Society meeting in San Francisco about 10 years ago, and there were tables set up from about 30 different organizations, which I guess are global organizations focused on African mammals, all at one event. So yeah, it's pretty amazing that there's so few organizations dedicated to amphibians, and hopefully that with our work we change that and inspire more action.
Yeah, absolutely. And for this most threatened group of creatures. And yeah, I mean, there is definitely, in the time that I've been doing this, absolute increase in the interest in amphibian related work and funding, and an increase in interest in the region, but it's still very, very underrepresented. So yeah, it took a couple of months to get things in place and get ready to do this, but officially launched on the 28th of February this year. At the end of February, we've run our National Frog Awareness Day, Leap Day for frogs, so literally playing into leap year, taking a leap of faith, and obviously linking to our leaping friends, the frogs. So we thought that would be a good day to launch. And I'm going to try, there's a little video here, I don't know if it's going to play. Can you hear the sound?
I cannot hear the sound.
You can't?
Nah, we had a meeting earlier today and someone shared and the sound didn't come through. So I don't know if it's a Zoom problem.
I'm just gonna stop sharing and try share with sound.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully you heard something that time.
We did.
You did, good. So that was just our little launch video on the 28th of February, but really hoping to showcase some of the work in the first year through a full nice video towards after 12 months of operations. So let's not have that again. We're a pretty small startup. Our founders are myself and co-director Keir Lynch. I've been working with Keir and his wife Eloise for several years through consulting work with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and these guys are amazing ecologists and really know a lot in the South African landscape. And we started working actually on a snake project, a little adder down in the Eastern Cape. And the conversation, the first time I met Keir was on that project. We went to go and talk to the landowners about this very threatened little adder. And I said, you guys like obscure things and hard to reach places. Would you like to work on the Amatola toad, which was a critically endangered species down in the Eastern Cape? And I've never seen someone get so excited about brown toads in my life other than myself. And that really started an amazing relationship back in 2018. And Keir and Eloise have come on board with the launch of Anura Africa. And yeah, so we're very small at the moment, but working towards building this capacity and getting projects established. We've been very fortunate this year so far just to have that space and support to establish the organization and get things set up so that we can start implementing projects hopefully by September this year. But it's been nice to sort of have that grace period. So yeah, for now it's myself and Keir as the front of the organization, but we are also in the process of establishing a scientific advisory board, which will be made up of various experts around the country and even beyond that are not only amphibian focused, but that can really help support our research element. We want to very strongly tie research to the conservation projects that we do. And so we think having this scientific advisory board is quite a good model. And then we also have a number of students already associated with several projects that we'll be working on. And this includes from the University of Cardiff and the University of Liverpool in the UK, some of whom I'm going to actually meet next week for the first time. So yeah, sort of both ends of the spectrum, having real sound advice from people who've been working in the sector for a very long time, and then having that student research capacity, and that's very much about also building that capacity. I keep going backwards. All right, so yeah, we really want to just tie those two ends together and have this landscape level approach. Of course, sometimes when we talk about amphibians and threatened amphibians in particular, they don't occur across these huge landscapes. So in Africa, it's a very different kind of thing where we think about creating these massive protected areas for huge herds of ungulates and hunting of those and those dynamics. So often our species are in very localized areas, and so it's quite a different approach. And typically amphibians have been completely overlooked in terms of habitat, protected habitat creation. But it's very important, even with these localized species, to think on a landscape level. These animals still move and they still rely on connectivity in order to survive. So yeah, as I mentioned, we really want to link our projects to research and have this conservation evidence element so that we know that what we are doing is both informed by research, but on a sort of iterative process. So if we do X, Y, Z, if it's implementing ecological fire, then does that actually work to support and stabilize populations of amphibians? And I think it's, it's something that's really growing in biological studies in general, and in conservation, it's promising to know that what we're doing is actually working, and we can't know that without having the research behind it. And then, yeah, of course, doing this alongside this strengthened capacity of local conservationists. So it's very important that we are building in-country capacity to do this work, and yeah, ultimately to ensure resilience for species, habitats, and communities. So our vision is quite a big one. Conserving Africa's amphibians, saving species, securing landscapes, and strengthening capacity. I mean, that's the broad brushstrokes. And yeah, that really is the vision. We're starting small and starting local. Maybe just to talk a little bit about our logo there. You know, we've got this continental view ultimately, but the species is actually the long-toed tree frog, Leptopilus denodactylus, which is my hometown frog, from the southern Drakensberg, Underberg. This amazing bright green tree frog that doesn't live in trees at all. It's a grassland, wetland thing. And I've never had a project on that species, so I'm very excited to have a dedicated project looking at that species and creating protected areas for it and getting habitat management in place and working with landowners to do so. And then, of course, having the research linked to that. You know, so it's this sort of bigger picture view of the continent, but starting with local hometown species. There he is, long-toed tree frog. You can see it gets its name from these incredibly long toes, which are obviously very useful when navigating through the grasslands. They are a very cool species. They sound like baby crocodiles. They come out for a very brief breeding period, so literally from September to mid-November, and they live in these foothills up in the Drakensberg and these grasslands. So even though they are part of the tree frog family, they don't occur anywhere where trees naturally occur. So very, very habitat specialist species. And this species is facing a lot of threats from the agricultural sector, a lot of drainage of wetlands and conversion for pastures and all that kind of stuff. But I digress because I've been distracted by a nice picture of a frog. So what are we trying to do here? You know, really trying to address knowledge gaps, which are very acute here in Africa. And again, you know, informed by this conservation evidence approach, building in-country research capacity, and really also harnessing the element of citizen science. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are interested in nature, and you know, we can really generate a huge amount of information from the public. And I think we've seen that through platforms like iNaturalist and the Australian Frog ID. It's absolutely incredible, the data that the public can generate. So we definitely want to build that here in Africa. And then having this landscape level habitat protection and management approach, obviously to, you know, secure long-term survival of target amphibian species and areas, but of course by focusing on flagship species, we also cover many other species and the habitats that they represent, and really towards this vision of ecosystem resilience and species adaptation, of course, you know, in the light of climate change and these kind of bigger, more insidious threats. And linking this to, you know, the global amphibian conservation plans like the ACAP, Amphibian Conservation Action Plan, and you know, really looking to build that conservation evidence and contribute to things like the state of the world's frogs, and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, we can't do this without having public and donor support and recognition of why amphibians are important and what they represent. So, you know, building on the work that I've done over the last nearly 20 years is how do we get just the general public excited about how cool frogs really are. So yeah, again, just sort of, underpinning that, these three core approaches: the research and conservation evidence, protection and habitat management to safeguard these priority species and where they live, and again, strengthening that local capacity. So we do this through research and conservation evidence. That's Keir looking a bit shell-shocked in a wetland. If you know the Western Cape in frog season, it's the middle of winter and chilly, and you've got to sort of wait around for the clouds to clear. Here he is waiting to do some drone mapping. He's done these amazing orthomosaic maps for this critically endangered little frog called the micro frog. He looks pretty chunky in this picture, but these things are the size of your thumbnail. They're one of South Africa's smaller species, and they literally occur in 3 places on the planet, and a 4th was discovered about 2 or 3 years ago in the Nuwejaars special management wetland area down near the Agulhas in the Western Cape. And thank goodness, because this is the largest, most intact area where the species occurs. It's previously been under farming, but these farm owners have come together to create the special management area and implement a lot of management like alien clearing and this kind of thing. And so we really want to link these management activities to the health of the habitat and watching how that hopefully improves through these management interventions, and then tying that to species health. And so we want to use acoustic monitoring of this little frog to see hopefully an expansion of where the frog occurs within these habitats, and really get a very good understanding of what those habitat requirements are. So, again, sort of positive feedback loop where we understand more about the species and what it needs so that we can inform management. So that's a project sort of brewing currently, and Keir is busy flying drones. As we speak, he finished up a bit more of this mapping work yesterday. That bottom picture is also just a nice image of those wetland systems in this space, and it's really an incredible place. I mean, even hippos live here, which you might not imagine for down in the Western Cape. And the Mend the Mulweni project is a project close to me here in KwaZulu-Natal, focused on the kloof frog, which is an endangered stream-dwelling species, again, very highly habitat specific, and facing huge impacts from pollution and siltation of these streams. We've got a very big problem in my area, and in fact, the whole of the Durban area. Our rivers are not in great shape, very polluted, and we are using the species and the monitoring protocol that's been rolled out for it for over 10 years now, and Arno is on the call, so he can answer any questions on that. But basically, they lay these very unique egg clumps, and we can use that as a proxy for species health. And hopefully what we're going to see through a lot of engagement with the municipality and the public and restaurants, which are causing all these fats and grease and sewage to run down the streams, is that this frog population will improve. And there's Arno, who's on the call, one of the student projects that I'm involved in. So again, just really trying to strengthen this capacity. There's a lot of people that want to get into amphibian conservation and research, but what is the sustainability of that, and how do we create long-term career paths for people like this, and how do we build this capacity, and how do we have more NGOs and organizations doing amphibian focused work in the region. And then, yeah, really important element is the public awareness and citizen science. Just really getting people out and about and connected to nature. We do a lot of events, frog evenings and educational activities and this kind of thing. And yeah, really, I can say in the time that I've been doing this, I think the first talk I ever gave, I had 2 people turn up, and now we sometimes have up to 300, which is a bit much to manage, but it just, there really is this interest, and there's so many young people that are so passionate and interested about the nature on their doorstep. And we're very lucky here in South Africa to still have these incredible green spaces literally on our doorstep. So it's really just trying to create that appreciation for these green local spaces, and then through that, oh hey, there's also this endangered frog here, or this interesting tree frog, or whatever it is, and making those linkages that way. We've also been very heavily involved as part of my role through the Amphibian Specialist Group as the regional chair to coordinate our next red list assessment updates. That's something that I'm busy with currently. We had an excellent and very productive workshop in April down in Cape Town, where we had 20 people, 20 experts from the region attending. We're fairly up to date with red list assessments in South Africa, where they're done every 5 years for threatened species, but this is the first time that they've been done for all species, including the least concerned species for the region in over 10 years. And so it's quite pivotal timing in terms of the launch of Anura Africa in guiding, where are the gaps. So Endangered Wildlife Trust is continuing the projects that I had started with them, but there's a lot of gaps and a lot of shifts in which species are threatened. So it's, the outcomes of this round of assessments is going to be important in guiding these next sort of 10 years or so of strategy and research. But yeah, it was a really great workshop. It looks warm and sunny there, but it was very freezing, I have to tell you. So yeah, as I say, the outcomes of the red list work is going to help us update the conservation and research strategy for South Africa. I think it's going to be interesting to see what changes there. And yeah, again, this emphasis on conservation evidence to guide this work. And we've looked at the entire region, not just South Africa, so 10 countries from the region. We had almost 300 species that we are looking at. It's been quite a big job, but also engaging with the very few, it's literally, again, just a handful of people that are working in neighboring countries for these assessments. And again, just bringing home, like, how do we build that in-country capacity, because it's really lacking. It's lacking in South Africa, but we're pretty advanced here. But compared to Namibia, Angola, Zambia, and these other surrounding countries, it's, we're lucky if there's one person per country sort of working in this space. We would love to do a kind of national replica of the state of the world's frogs for South Africa. So, where are things here based on these recent assessments? And then, of course, people might say, well, why do we need red list assessments, like just as a list? But to me, this is one of the few guides that we have in knowing how to prioritize our resources. And as I say, threatened species do cover and are umbrella species for a lot of other species and habitats that coexist. And that's what allows us to fundraise and focus on these species. But these processes, the red list assessments, are really pivotal in terms of informing national and international targets. So the IUCN process is critical for meeting those international targets. We're all familiar with the 30 by 30 now. We really don't have long to make some major changes. But each country that signs up for the Convention of Biological Diversity targets, ultimately that is informed by red list processes. So, there's a full sort of tie in between what's happening nationally and globally. And it also helps us as the practitioners on the ground to know where and how to focus our resources. As in any organization, we can't do this work alone. So we've been running for a little over, not quite 6 months so far. And yeah, already have quite a few established partnerships and working with several universities as well, and funders. And so just really excited to watch how this space grows. And I think there's such huge potential, both internationally and again, looking regionally as well. So big thanks to our funders so far and our partners. And yeah, I mean, really, this is what it's about. My vision, for this next decade or so is how do we strengthen this regional and continental network. So it's really great to connect with you here, Kerry, in terms of what Save the Frogs Africa is doing, and how do we start connecting those dots, and how do we also connect with other regional specialist groups, and make these organizational connections just towards the same objective of saving frogs, literally. And yes, of course, we can't do this without funding. That's any of us that work in the space, that's never ending. But again, I think it's quite good timing for this. And it's not that there isn't funding, it's just that actually the amphibian conservation community doesn't step up as much as we probably could. And so it's really, how do we unlock that funding and direct it to these needs, strengthening those research collaborations. I think the acoustic space in terms of amphibian research is wildly exciting. As always, we're a bit behind the birds, but I think there's such an incredible power to be had in that space. So we're looking at that quite a lot. And then, looking at these priority areas that have been highlighted through the State of the World's amphibians, and the publication that came out last year linked to that, based on the we've just started the third global amphibian assessment. So the results of the GAA2 highlighted some priority areas across the globe, and so we want to look at those for Africa. And yeah, again, just sort of that capacity building, and how can we mentor those of us who've been in this game for a while. How can we share our learnings and knowledge and really get people in country excited to roll this out in their respective countries? And yeah, short and sweet, but that's really in a nutshell our vision and where we want to go. And yeah, thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Jeanne Tarrant. Why don't you go ahead and unshare your screen? All right. Let's see. First off, I just posted in here a note. Wildlife acoustics can help researchers in need of bioacoustics hardware. They have a grant program. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yes. We've actually had a student try twice now, and it hasn't been successful. So I think there's obviously big competition for those grants. But
well, keep on trying, because as a grantor, I know that if I see someone's name over and over, then I start getting used to them, and I realize they're dedicated, and I may even feel a little sorry for them after so long, like, this person always applies, we've never given them money. So I think just keep at it if it's relevant, which I'm assuming it is. Okay, we had a question come in. How many different kind of frogs do you have in South Africa? I'll let you answer that, and then I'll show you how I would answer it, not having been to South Africa.
Okay, so in South Africa, the country, we currently have 135 described species, and for the region, Southern Africa, which is 10 countries, as I say, there's about 300 species that will occur across borders in the region, about 170 endemic species.
Amphibian species, is that correct? Or is that just frogs?
So in South Africa, we only have frogs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good to know. All right, cool.
Yeah. No, the Sicilians are from sort of northern Mozambique, a couple of species there, but yeah.
Okay.
We have the
All right.
frogs, yeah.
All right, and no salamanders or newts in Africa?
There are 4 species of salamander way up north, Algiers and Morocco.
Okay, probably transports from Europe.
Some of those. I think they might naturally occur there. It's pretty close to Spain. I don't know. They might have hopped across. But yeah, very much a northern hemisphere thing. So those are on my bucket list, to see a newt or a salamander.
Okay.
Still haven't seen a tailed amphibian.
Okay. I have never seen a Sicilian, even though once on our Save the Frogs Costa Rica eco tour, the other group we had split up, they came across one. But Still haven't seen them. Nancy has a question. Do you have any large toads there? And do you have the Egyptian toad, which I'll just take a guess and say no, because Egypt's a long way away.
Egypt is a long way away. We do have some very large endemic toads. Our sort of garden variety is called the guttural toad. He makes a big noise, and they can get pretty sizable. But then our biggest toad is the very beautiful western leopard toad down in the Western Cape. They have their name because they've got this amazing yellow and brown spots. They look like leopards. Their Latin name is Pantherina. And yeah, they probably get good 12 centimeters. And then one of my students at the moment is looking at the Asian common toad as a potential invasive species. That thing has invaded Madagascar badly, and we don't want the same thing to happen here in South, because there is a surveillance project on that, and I think those things get pretty big too.
How do you think they got to Madagascar?
Shipping containers. Yeah, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could be coming in here the same way.
Yeah. All right. Let me share my screen briefly, and I'm going to go to my go-to website when I need to know what amphibians live in a certain country. Okay, so Amphibia Web has been around forever, pretty much. And right here we can see how many known identified amphibian species there are. And then right here, search database. That's where I go. And then we're back to the old part of the site that has pretty much never changed. This right here, click map to search by country. That's where I usually go, but you can search by all types of different things right here, and then just click the search button. But let's just click in there and click to Africa, and then go down to South Africa. And now we've got this list, and it tells us 132 species. I thought you had said 155. What number did you say?
135.
135.
So it's not
okay.
It's not far off. Probably missing, well, yeah, 3 of the latest descriptions.
Yeah, so in different sites they'll use different names, especially for common names, but possibly even different scientific names. But this is where I usually go, and it's got tons of good information, and it's got even things like status. Let's see if it oh no, that's not going to do that. But sometimes I just kind of I wonder if they have an export button. I may just copy it, put it in a spreadsheet, and then you can kind of sort it down to different things, like only show me the critically endangered species. All right, so this is a good resource. And then as far as frogs and toads, we can see right there the order of which everything is Anura. Okay, good. All right,
Hence Anura Africa. So we're not against the Sicilians or the salamanders.
Yeah, I like the name. I like your logo too. My thought on the logo is maybe there's a way. I was kind of just looking at it, the NURA, and I guess I'm not looking at it right now, but the Africa, it's got like a black border because it crosses different colors in the background.
Yeah.
So but it's a little hard to see. Maybe you can improve that a little bit, but overall I like it a lot. The other thing I thought was you could also potentially just take the globe with the frog and move that aside, and then write Anura Africa beside it, so that it's got the kind of logo thing, and then it's also got the text. Just some ideas to experiment with. We have a question. Do you have any citizen science project? Or I think more so, what type of volunteer, if someone here, especially if they're not based in South Africa, wants to help out, or maybe both of those things, then what do you suggest?
Yeah, so I think that the main citizen science stuff is really that data generation. So there's several kind of virtual platforms to do that. The leading one now is iNaturalist, which is globally, so really just encouraging citizens to put their records on there. And yeah, I mean, so currently within Anura Africa as an organization, we don't have any established citizen science projects, but I've been in chats with several organizations, including recently Bats Without Borders, and I think we share a lot of the sort of hesitancy around these creatures. You know, they're creatures of the night. There's a lot of superstitions around them, and people have genuine phobias around frogs and bats. And Bats Without Borders have some really great training programs in place, and it would be great if we could start to replicate some of those on the amphibian front. But yeah, I mean, as projects become established, it's always great to have voluntary help on those, which can be sometimes quite difficult. You know, you need someone that's quite dedicated, and it has to, you know, it's our job as the project leads to direct what kind of information is being generated by those volunteers. So it has to work both ways. But yeah, there's always opportunity for that. I think you're muted.
Any other questions? Send them in if you want to unmute yourself and ask or say something. You can do that too.
Yeah, I have one. I know there's been a terrible El Nino drought in all of Southern Africa for the last almost 2 years. How much of an impact has this had on your efforts for conservation and habitat development?
Yeah, so it actually has different impacts in different parts of the country. So South Africa is a very big country, and it's different. It actually has 2 different rainfall patterns in the east and the west. And actually the central parts of South Central, the Eastern Cape, has been hardest hit by that drought over the last more than 2 years, really around 10 years. And that has had pretty severe impacts in that province. Here where I live on the east coast in KwaZulu-Natal, we've had the opposite. We've had major, horrific floods for the last couple of years. And that also has big impacts. It's interesting because I think things like fish are obviously impacted more directly, and literally the frogs manage to like hang on to their reeds and hang in there. And in some cases we actually saw a bumper year, again referring to the blue frog, where we have a long-term monitoring program in place. After the floods, the breeding activity actually increased. And we'd seen, as a result of the drought a couple of years prior to that, the breeding activity had, you know, understandably decreased. But that's also why it's important to have these monitoring programs running long term, so we can, you know, notice these kind of fluctuations in response to climatic variables. But yeah, it certainly shows that it's something to be aware of going forward. And climate change for South Africa is certainly predicted to have pretty major drying effects, which is going to impact a lot of amphibian species.
Well, actually, it's going to shift because we're going into La Nina. I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year and the next year, you're going to see the whole pattern shift around to having more precipitation, where you've had all the droughts the last few years.
Yeah, again,
I'm a retired meteorologist, so I know all this stuff.
Oh yeah, you know a lot more than me. But yeah, again, I think it sort of depends on which area you're in. But yeah, it's certainly so. With the IUCN assessments now, they've wanted us to try and think about climate change, which is really difficult for amphibians because you know, those predictions are 50 years or 80 years ahead, and it's hard to sort of put that down to amphibian life cycles, which are a lot shorter. But yeah, definitely things to think about and potentially be concerned about. And again, this is, you know, why our landscape approach to building landscape resilience is so important, so that resilience is there, so species can adapt. I mean, these things have been around for millions of years. They've been through climatic shifts. They've managed to hang in a hell of a long time. But can we give them that buffer and resilience to tolerate these impacts?
Well, I'm glad you're doing all this work. It's really great.
Thanks, Jack.
I have a question, and I guess it does kind of relate to climate change. That's not usually the angle I come at it from, but what's the status of wetlands in the country? In the USA, the vast majority of the wetlands have been destroyed through intensive agriculture for centuries. And most of the places people cannot even recognize that there used to be wetlands at what they're looking at. So is there a shortage of wetlands? Would the restoration or construction of wetlands help? And are there any groups that are focused on that?
Yeah, it's similar here, Kerry. Probably 50 to 70% of our wetlands have been historically destroyed by agriculture primarily. And it's quite interesting because, you know, we feel like, oh, all this transformation is happening now. It just seems to be never ending. But when we look at it, it's actually pre-1990 where most of that transformation happened, before 1990. So wetlands have been heavily impacted, agriculture, particularly sugarcane, drainage, that kind of thing. And yes, there are a lot of groups working actively on wetland rehabilitation, and that's certainly a tool in the belt for, you know, species recovery, and there's several projects on the go that are looking at exactly that. So definitely the space that we are working in and working with wetland ecologists to bring back wetlands.
All right, I just put a link in the chat to the Save the Frogs wetlands course. If anyone out there is interested in learning how to build wetlands, go take that course. And check out Save the Frogs Academy. All of you should have a Save the Frogs account now, and for the first 28 days of your account, you can access all the Save the Frogs Academy courses for free. If you want to keep access to them after that, become a Save the Frogs member, which you can do either by donating or by applying for a scholarship. savethefrogs.com/scholarships. Check that out. Let's see. We have a question from Elena, but first, let's get to this question that came in first. Nancy mentions chytridiomycosis tents, which I believe were mentioned in an article that came out, which I assume is build something like a greenhouse over the habitat of the frogs, and that would warm them up to reduce the amount of chytrid fungus. If I got that wrong, Nancy, let me know. The question is, any work on chytridiomycosis tents? There's a group that's creating frog tents that apparently help increase temps during different times of the year. Frogs go in and then the fungus starts to lose its grip.
That's the first I hear of these tents. Very interesting. Yeah, it is interesting because where we see the most apparent impacts of chytrid in Southern Africa is at high elevation, so cooler, typically cooler areas, but I think that are being perhaps exacerbated by these increases in temperature, and those are the only places where we see die-offs caused by the fungus. There is an active group at the Northwest University with Prof. Shay Weldon. They work on amphibian disease. I did quite a lot of work on the fungus during my PhD. I called it the You've Been Swabbed show, and went around and looked at threatened species and the impact of BD on them. And we are relatively fortunate in this country where it's a, you know, disease is here, but the prevalence is low and the intensity is low, and we're not seeing these hectic die-offs like you get in the Central Americas and Australia and that. So I don't know about the chytrid tents, but I will ask Shay and see if that's something. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing, we've got to work on species adaptability and natural resistance, and, you know, hope that then that gets exhibited in populations.
John, perhaps you could invite Shay to speak here. My question for you is actually going to be the status of chytrid these days and what's happened over the past 20 years. I remember reading Shay's papers when I was doing my PhD research 20 plus years ago. So yeah, I'd love to have him on here. And also anyone else you know who you think would give a good relevant presentation, please let them know. Oh yeah,
Arno.
let's see.
Arno's on the call now. Get him.
Right.
He's going to talk about his master's project on the very cool kloof frog.
Okay, cool. I'm going to put this link in right here, which
there,
I believe is correct. Click that link, savethefrogs.com/Save speakers and submit a application, which
He's
just says
laughing.
your abstract and info about you.
What
Elena,
about building capacity, Anna? You have to learn to talk.
super important to give presentations, and it's usually fun, at least when you're talking about frogs.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Great organization. Very excited to see the work that you will bring forth. My personal favorite is the forests of West Africa and Central Africa, and I'm afraid of the mining that's going to get rid of all the cool species that are there, some that haven't even been discovered, and or described. So like when you start expanding into these African regions outside of the southern hemisphere, or how do you think you can approach like the context of mining, especially in countries that are so underdeveloped and rely on artisanal mining in these wetland areas, and where all the gold is, it's quite tricky.
Hi, Eleanor. Hope you're well. I like your albatrosses, I think. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing in West Africa and many parts of Africa, this sort of rush for mining is really such a big threat. And, it's either consultants going in there to assess the pre threat risk, and are generating such great data on that, which hopefully can get shared to the conservationists. And yeah, I mean, Kerry, I know you work in Ghana, so maybe better place to answer questions for West
Yeah.
Africa.
Go on.
No, or just like, there's such valuable information coming out on this amazing species richness in these places that absolutely we need to work to secure those areas and prevent these mining developments happening.
Yeah, I just went to the Save the Frogs site, went to the search bar at the top of the site, put in the word mining, and got the link that I just put in the chat here. And it looks like the first 4 articles are about mining and our efforts in Ghana. And so there's a frog, the Togo slippery frog, and it only has a couple known populations. And the main one is in the Atiwa Hills, which are a place that companies would love to mine. And there's, yes, plenty of illegal mining, which is just people walking around, usually with like a, I don't know, bucket kind of thing on their head, walking between the village and the mines and just taking whatever they want. So that causes small scale damage, but then you've got the big machines and potentially mountaintop removal. And yeah, we had a Save the Frogs University chapter focused on that campaign to prevent the mining of the Atiwa Hills. And that was the chapter, they were, the university that's closest to that location. So that's basically became the campaign of importance to them. And they also started a Save the Frogs student group at a local school. These are like elementary school kids, to get the kids knowledgeable about frogs. When I visited that school that I had never been into, those kids knew a whole lot about frogs because the university group had been going there. So they hopefully maintain that knowledge through their life, but also spread it through the village and hope to educate people in the village. And the other thing would be to provide alternative livelihoods. If people are going out there and doing any kind of environmentally destructive actions because that's their only job choice, then one good thing is to provide them with training and potentially equipment. So in another part of Ghana, Save the Frogs Ghana for many years was providing training in beekeeping to villagers who were going out into the forest and chopping trees and then lighting fires, which would be how they'd get the bees out of there so they could collect wild honey. So they were providing training on beekeeping and also equipment to the villagers to get them producing honey in the village versus in the forest. Aside from that, just a whole lot of education and potentially lobbying. We also had protests in Ghana, which I think, sorry, in Accra, the capital, which is what at least one of those articles is about, and partnerships. Save the Frogs Ghana was working with various other groups in Ghana to raise awareness of that mining issue. All right, have you done any work with Roots and Shoots? It's a good way to reach young people. I'll say that Roots and Shoots, I believe in South Africa, I'm going to find the picture right now, celebrated Save the Frogs Day in maybe 2017, and we've got some good photos of that. So, Jeanne, while you answer that question, I'll go search out some photos.
You have a good memory. Not directly. I've heard of them, but haven't worked directly with them. So yeah, sounds like a good tip.
All right, here, yeah, 2017 in Deep Salute, South Africa. There is the link to it. Let me just share the screen.
Good turnout.
Yeah, good turnout on the side of the road. I never figured out why they chose this precise spot right here. It looks like there's nothing there, but I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe there's a wetland there or something like that.
It's a bullfrog place. See, they've got some bullfrogs.
Okay.
Which is South Africa's biggest frog species.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
pretty highly impacted
wow.
by development and roads and this kind of thing. And I saw just this week there's been a successful interdict against the development in one of these areas, probably close to Deep Salute, Heidelberg. So it was a little win for a big frog preventing development. And that's, also the power of citizen science and the public getting on board and being able to prevent developments. So, yeah.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to add a couple final thoughts, and then I'll let you give a final thought, and then we'll end this. So, Save the Frogs is kind of planning to have a Zambia eco tour that would potentially be in January of 2025. And if that takes place, then we will have a Save the Frogs World Summit in Livingstone, not sure how to pronounce it, at southern Zambia. That would be a free event. You just have to get yourself there, get yourself a hotel. And my plan is to be there for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days. And we'd have some presentations and some field excursions. And so hopefully you can make it to that. And let's see, the other thing is that tentative plan, January 2026, of Save the Frogs South Africa eco tour, which would be in eastern South Africa. Nothing set for that, but kind of in the future. So if that happens, then it would be good to meet up with a lot of amphibian biologists in South Africa.
Well, both of those sound fantastic. I would be very keen to come to Zambia. I've never been there, so that would be good. And then, just let me know if you need any help with the East Africa one. Zululand is where you want to be. That's where our highest species richness is. So if you're wanting to do eco tours, that's where it's at. Lots of cool things happening. And January is a pretty good time of year for that to be happening.
I actually have one question. This has always been a question related to amphibian field work in places with large carnivores. How do you deal with the large carnivore issue when you're out there at night? I think of this as I did my PhD research in Australia, and there a few places I went was crocodile territory, and I never felt too good walking down to the side of a water body in any place that was crocodile territory.
Your biggest problem is the human the human species mostly. So I've never had an issue. I mean, it's quite rare actually, as I say, that a lot of frog species of interest occur in these big 5 reserves anyway. And you'd have to organize permits to be out at night and that kind of thing. The bigger problem is actually the hippos. So I've been in a few sort of sunset situations, which is when the hippos move around through these wetlands as well, and so you're a little bit on edge for that. And you know, the hippos have the reputation, I think, of actually killing the most people in Africa as far as mammals go. So you don't want to run into those guys at dusk. But no, it's never been a problem. So
Okay.
yeah.
Do people wait until it gets fully dark and the hippos are not out, or you just go where you're going and hope for the best?
Sorry, just there has been one event near the Kruger National Park where we had to wrap things up because apparently there were lions in the vicinity, but we had guards looking out for that. So yeah, I mean, if you know you're going to be in a high sort of predator area, then you've got your measures in place. So the hippos will come out of the wetlands at dusk, and then they graze and are out of the water at night, and that's when they feel the most vulnerable. And so it is a conflict with frogging, because that's obviously when we want to go frogging. But yeah, again, I've seen hippos in the distance, so you just got to be aware and have a plan in place. Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts, and then we'll end it. You have anything else you want to add?
Just really great to make the connection, and this is what this is all about. And yeah, thanks everyone for your time and listening. And yeah, please follow us on social media. Feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, looking forward to growing the Africa network. So Kerry, keep in touch about the stuff you've going on with Save the Frogs, and really pleased to reconnect.
All right, thanks for being here. Let me just add one more thing, and let me share my screen. First, we got a link to these what they're calling them frog saunas right here. But yeah, I don't know if that's the standard way they want them built. It looks kind of cool. Let me
Or is
what
that
I
the
want.
tent?
I guess that would be a frog sauna. I don't know if a frog tent would be something else, but same concept. Give them some place that heats up, and they seem to like it unless they got put there as frog models. What I want to do real fast is show you all the Save the Frogs Africa webpage, which you've all been to, but the video for this will end up here. The Zoom login is always going to be right here if you're logged into the site. If you're not logged in, it'll show a registration form. Hey, there it is right there. I added that yesterday to make it really easy to find. And then if you scroll down, schedule of events right there, and the video will go right here. So every time we have a presentation, it'll get added here with the video. And the other thing, see if this worked, my account page, when you log into the site, this is something I added about a month ago. Now you've got all of our different kind of recurring events that you can register for are here. And the ones you're registered will show up, and there's a Zoom login right there. So multiple ways to find the Zoom logins and what other events are going on that you could join us for. All right, let me stop that share and send a big thank you to everyone for being here. Let's get some more people on these calls. Spread the word. We'll be back the last Saturday of July. I hope to see you there. Bye.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks everyone. Cheers. Bye.